I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside. It's so comfortable, and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off-road. The guy managed the group. He was like, what are you doing in this beautiful car? I'm like, I'm going off-road. He's like, are you sure? Because you can use one of ours. And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, no, we're going to do this. And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability, as well as its robust interior, are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the 2-door Defender 90, the 4-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
These days, we're all investors, trying to be smart with our money despite our worst impulses. But at iShares, we believe that deep down inside of every investor is a better investor. One that's just waiting to be let out. Explore iShares ETFs and insights and let your best investor out. Visit iShares.com for more information.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show on the Choose Yourself Network.
Whoa, new sponsor. Thanks, Thumbtack. Today's episode is brought to you by Thumbtack. People tell me Thumbtack is great. Let me just describe what they do. They make it easy for you to find and hire a skilled local professional for anything possible that's on your to-do list. From home improvement projects to event planning to personal wellness, Thumbtack makes it easy to find pros for pretty much anything you need done. Download the app or try it now at thumbtack.com. That's thumbtack.com. Today's show is also brought to you by ZipRecruiter. ZipRecruiter can help you find the right hire. With ZipRecruiter, you can post your job to over 100 job sites with just one click. Find out today why ZipRecruiter has been used by businesses of all sizes to find the most qualified job candidates with immediate results. And right now, this second, my listeners can post jobs on ZipRecruiter for free. That's right, free. Just go to ZipRecruiter.com/James. That's ZipRecruiter.com/James. One more time, to try it for free, go to ZipRecruiter.com/James.
Today on the James Altucher Show.
All in the same weekend, what happened was a close friend attempted suicide and a family member died. So I took a week and a half off. I was at the point where I just had to take care of myself, and spent the next year basically trying everything that I could to get myself out of that state of anxiety, which again is, you know, we all experience anxiety on some level, but not like this. This was different. This was debilitating. I found myself isolated because I didn't want anybody I interacted with to catch this weird energy that I had. It felt like I was contagious, and I felt like I was losing my mind. It felt like I was dying, and it destroyed so many things in my life. I think it was a number of factors, which were chronic sleep deprivation, chronic play deprivation.
Chronic play deprivation.
Yeah.
I like that phrase.
Yeah.
Because I think many people suffer from that.
I 100% agree. There's a quote in there from Stuart Brown. He's the author of Play. And that's the book that was my 180 moment. It was the aha that led to recovering in a couple of weeks, which he says the opposite of play isn't work, it's depression.
So Charlie Hoehn, this is the second time I've had you on, but maybe people probably don't even realize the first time, which was 3 years ago. You wrote a book called Play It Away.
Yeah.
How basically playing saved you from enormous anxiety and panic attacks and made your work life much better. And I feel like this next book, this upcoming book, Play for a Living, which is beautifully designed. I'm holding it in my hand now. This is kind of an extension of that, just how play essentially makes life much better, whether you're a hard worker or not a hard worker, or whether you want to be a success or whatever. Play is a critical component of that. So welcome back to the show.
Thank you, James.
But, before I get to this book, I want to talk about a Facebook post you did a few months ago about the power of free. And maybe describe that post again. I really liked it, and I actually really wanted to plagiarize it right afterwards. I think I might have a little bit, actually, so I apologize for that.
Oh, please, it's an honor. Steal all you want. So I think the post you're referring to, I was just talking about how basically every opportunity that I've created for myself has come about through doing free work. And I think the excuses we come up with for not doing what we want to do are kind of silly. We think we need somebody to say, okay, you're hired. Now here's your homework assignment. Go do it. And I just don't believe it. I mean, that's why I'm a fan of yours, right? It's the choose yourself mentality.
Well, and if you think about it, if you think about every great success, probably this is not true for every great success, but if you think about like 90% of them, they started off doing things for free. Like, let's just take Albert Einstein. Okay, his job was to work in, the Swiss patent office, and on the side for free, he developed a special theory of relativity, which, propelled him to being, considered the smartest person ever. Like, that's just the example that first comes to mind, but there are many, many others.
Yeah. How did people discover that he was doing it? Like, how did he release that work?
He just he submitted it to an academic publication, and they realized, oh, this is a work of genius, and they published it. And it wasn't so far. It wasn't like he was thinking 40 years ahead of his peers. He was thinking like maybe 1 or 2 years ahead of his peers. Like, other scientists were close to this, so he was extending their work, but in a very creative way, because he had this visual way of looking at things. He was able to write about it in this beautiful fashion, combined with all the math to back it up. So that's essentially how he did it. But he took that job so that he would have the time, the free time to work on this. So, but what are some other examples from history?
Well, I can give you a personal example. So last night, a reader of mine named Darvinder picked me up from the airport. And he actually created on the side for fun a thing called Google Hobbies. Now, he doesn't work for Google. He just did it because he thought it would be a really cool idea. And he was learning user experience. So he developed this beautiful user experience for if you wanted to learn guitar or some hobby, what that process would be like if you were doing it for free through Google. And he wrote this post and laid out his entire process for building this. And I helped him at the beginning to say, okay, you need like a GIF, a movie basically of how this works right at the top so people can immediately understand it and everything and why you did it. That blew up. And he had all these companies reaching out to him and asking him like, basically, can you do these types of projects for us? And I've had a number of readers do similar things, just reaching out to people that they thought were doing great work and offering to work for them for free.
And if you look at it, like, take something like Twitter. The original company was called Odeo. It was actually a podcasting app, maybe a little before its time. Mm-hmm. And Jack Dorsey was just sort of in the corner working on this like SMS chat app for free, as a side project. I mean, I think a lot of companies like,
I think even Instagram might have just been like a
Yeah.
side project.
That's what I was thinking of as well. What did it start off as?
Gosh, I forget.
Like the photo filter was just a feature, a side thing.
Yeah.
And that ended up being the most popular element of the app. And then they just made that the whole app and it took off.
And for you, I mean, basically every job you've ever gotten is because you initially started doing stuff for free.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And just to go back to your original question, historically, Warren Buffett, I mean, he got his start working for, was it Ben Graham?
Yeah, Benjamin Graham.
Yeah, who he offered to work for him for free, and Ben Graham said, "You're overcharging," and he said that was the best move of his career.
And then, even when he was working for Ben Graham for free, and they had a great relationship, they got along very well. But Warren Buffett eventually did want a full-time job. But do you know why Ben Graham couldn't offer him a job? Did you ever hear this story?
I don't know.
Because so many Wall Street firms at the time were not hiring Jewish people. So Ben Graham was hiring Jews and Warren Buffett was not Jewish.
Really?
So he sent Warren Buffett back to Omaha.
No
and
kidding.
that was the end of that. But of course they, were best friends for
course.
life. But
Yeah.
it was sort of reverse anti-Semitism at work.
Right. Yeah, you don't hear about that too often.
And Warren Buffett, if you think about it, he's another great example. He started his first business was a hedge fund, and most hedge funds charge a fee up front as well as a fee on the profits. So if I started a hedge fund and you were going to give me $1 million, I would charge you first a 2% fee. So $20,000 goes right off the top into my pocket. Warren Buffett did not do that. He charged 0%. So he would take your money, charge you nothing, and then he would charge 25% of the profits, but only if you returned more than, I think it was 6%, only if he returned more than 6% on your money. So he was basically, up until that first 6% of your profits, he made no money off of any of his clients. And through that kind of almost free fee structure, he became a billionaire.
Did he do that to earn clients' trust faster, or did he do it because he knew long-term it was a much better deal for him?
Well, I think both approaches almost seem Machiavellian in that, I don't think he was thinking that far ahead.
Sure.
I think maybe there was a little bit of, nobody would trust a kid. He was a very young guy.
Yeah.
No one would trust essentially a kid with their money if he was just taking money up front. But I think he really felt it was unfair to take any money unless he proved his value above and beyond the typical Wall Street firm, which took fees left and right.
Yeah.
So I think there was a combination of him thinking he needed to prove his value and then also earning the trust.
Right. Yeah.
Which part of it is a lot of it with all of these things, even with your own situations, is earning trust as well as, doing something for free because you want to, show your value.
Right.
So it's
That's why you do this podcast too.
Yeah, I mean, look, the podcast, everybody listens to it for free. I write, 99% of the things I write totally for free. My books are 99 cents or, however low Amazon can let me price them. So what are some other great examples?
Personally or from
Both.
Okay, so I had one that came to mind. It was Jim Carrey. Just going to the Comedy Store over and over. He was driving dozens of miles, I think close to 50 miles sometimes, to Yuck Yuck's Comedy Store night after night. Wouldn't pay for even his parking stub, but he just kept showing up over and over until he got good enough.
And that's true for many. If you look at the careers of many comedians, like David Letterman, Jay Leno, Robin Williams, they all performed at a place called the Comedy Store in LA in the 70s, and they specifically did not get paid. So, and all of them, of course, went on to huge mega careers because it takes a long time to build the skills to do what they ended up doing later on. And they just built those skills for free night after night.
Yeah, exactly. And personally, when I got out of college, it was 2008, and I spent 3 months applying to about 100 jobs that I didn't really want.
Like what?
Ad agencies, the middle management positions at corporate companies that I just didn't really feel aligned with their products or their values. I reached a point where I got so desperate that I was applying to like audio staging companies that set up equipment for bands and stuff. And not that that's a bad job, but it's not one you go to college for, you know? So I kind of got slapped with the reality of the situation. And I just decided, okay, I'm going to work for free for people that are doing things that are aligned with what I love and what I really want to learn about, and people I really respect. I told my parents, I'm just going to give this a shot, see if it works out. I'm not making any progress whatsoever doing the traditional route, and none of my friends were either.
You think it's getting harder and harder for people? I mean, this kind of goes along with a lot of stuff I believe in, but you think it's getting harder and harder for people coming out of 4-year degrees to get jobs that satisfy them in some way? Like when you look at your friends and peers and so on?
Yeah, I think that it's hard if you have certain expectations of the old world, where you're hoping you're going to have a job that lasts 10, 20, 30 years. That's just not going to happen, right? And I still see that expectation is that, you know, I just need this secure, stable job. It's not happening. These companies are laying off those people. So what I did was I worked for free for Ramit Sethi, our friend Ramit. And
how'd you pitch him?
I pitched him because I had just finished up a virtual internship with Seth Godin, and me and about a dozen others around the world were participating in that. And I messaged him and I said, I'm a huge fan of your work. It's made an impact on my life. And I actually took a screenshot of how I was spending my money. So Ramit does, I will teach you to be rich. And I said, I noticed that you are actually really good on video. You're a natural on video, but you don't do it very often. And it could have this great effect on your marketing. It could build a stronger relationship with your readers. It shows a more human side to you, because sometimes it's hard to understand in your writing what kind of person you are, if you're this gruff person or you're sarcastic. So I said, I'm a video editor. I'd be happy to edit any videos that you shoot and make them look good, and I'll do it for free. And he said, yeah, that sounds great. Send me a sample of your work. And we started doing that. And then I ended up helping him with marketing his book, his first book, and that did well.
How did you market the book?
Well,
because that was a New York Times bestseller.
Yeah, it was a bestseller. It hit number 1 overall on Amazon, which at the time Twilight was dominating on Amazon.
I didn't know that about that book.
Yeah. It happened for a day. Mm-hmm. So what we did was he and I both created marketing plans independently, and then just compared notes and just combined them into one. And as I recall, the focus was we gotta do like a live stream all day long and get as many people on that and just incentivize them to buy a book now. And I think we actually bended some rules to do that. So we were doing contests where if you buy the book, you're entered into win like $1,000 from Mint to start a savings account, which we found out like midway through the contest, you can't do that. If you want to do a contest, you can't create a purchase as the ticket in. Oddly enough.
Amazon has a rule about that?
It's not Amazon. It's just illegal.
Oh, okay.
That's the rule.
But nobody, it's not like the police are going to show up at your door.
Yeah, exactly. So
you run a bogus.
Right.
You're giving away $1,000.
Yeah, how dare you? Yeah. So we were giving away Kindles and stuff, and so we got all these orders to happen in a tight time frame. So it was my first personal, like, professional win. And from there, I started reaching out to other authors.
So let's break that down, though. Yeah. You basically researched a guy that you admired, Ramit, and you found out maybe the one hole in his marketing where he could do a lot better, and it matched your skill set, and you kind of gave him a plan of how you could help him do that.
Yeah.
He did it, and it had positive results, and that becomes a huge mark on your resume.
Yeah, and it took some time, and I didn't come to him and say, "Hey, your website design sucks," because I'm not a web designer. I see
Right.
that problem a lot, or that mistake that people make is they just point out flaws in
Right.
people's stuff, and
I get that all the time.
Yeah, it's not it's not cool to do that unless you're proactively handing them a solution. So
That's really important.
yeah.
And you hand them solution, and by the way, you don't necessarily have expectations.
No,
because
it's a gift.
Ramit could have said, "Hey, you're right.
Yeah.
I do have a video guy I'm about to hire. Thanks a lot. Keep in touch."
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
and that would have been fine
a lot
too.
of it's timing,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I was keeping pace with Ramit's work, and I'd done so much research and digging into delicious bookmarks was a thing at the time, right? It was really
remember that.
active. Yeah, Ramit used it prolifically, so I was able to see exactly what he was studying. I so miss delicious bookmarks.
That was
It
a
so
great little website, and then Yahoo bought it for $10 million. I want to say in 2006.
Yeah.
And they had just finished a funding round. They were about to do a funding round. I remember it was Josh Shackman. Is that makes? I forget his name. And Yahoo bought it for $10 million, and then just trashed the whole thing. It like disappeared.
It was devastating.
Yeah, it was a
For
good
me.
social sharing site.
Oh yeah, all my smartest friends were using it to share smart things that we were reading and strategy and stuff. So it was a blow when that went down. But at the time, I felt like I was hacking into these guys' minds, right?
Yeah.
So I did that with Ramit. Then I reached out to our friend Tucker Max, and similar thing where I said, I've worked with or did this virtual internship with Seth Godin. I just helped Ramit with his book, and I knew that his movie was coming out. And I said, if you need any help with marketing or video, I can do both of those things. And at this point, I'd been blogging for about 6 months. I had, I think, 20 readers total. And it shocked me that Tucker was actually one of them. And he said, I actually know who you are. I subscribed to your blog. And so he said, yeah, I'd be happy to do something together. And we ended up working together as well. And both of those guys eventually recommended me to Tim Ferriss, and he and I ended up working together for a few years.
So basically, as opposed to working for, at the bottom up from like an ad agency or an audio agency or whatever, you ended up, because you started offering free services to Seth Godin, to Ramit, to Tucker, and then to Tim, you basically kind of built these relationships with all these influencers. And then, of course, you started writing books and becoming an influencer yourself. So it kind of catapulted into this dream career. And now you're working with Tucker on Book in a Box.
Yeah. I mean, 8 or 9 years later, that cold email turned into, man, so much more than a working relationship, a really great friendship, and just a ton of stuff.
What is, I mean, again, you see this all through history. Like it feels like there are two types of jobs. There's kind of the standard institutional jobs where you have a certificate that qualifies you for a low-level entry job, and you start rising up through that. And then there's the type of jobs that are skill-dependent, like, let's say, music, art, even business or entrepreneurship. And it seems like those require a lot more of the willing to do free.
Yeah.
Because there's no formal pay structure. Oh, we're going to pay you to be the greatest musician in the world.
Right.
Because you're starting off with no skills by definition, and we'll pay you to learn how to perform on a stage and have a top 10 hit on Billboard along the way, and you'll be a huge success. Like you have to take a sacrifice to hit that top.
Yeah, and the irony is that Ryan Holiday actually pointed this out to me. He said the irony is that we, for certain professions, we are quick to say, "Don't work for free. What a ripoff!" right? You don't deserve, or you deserve to be paid what you're worth. And yet, for every athlete, we expect them to play through college. And in fact, there are rules to prevent them from leaving college before they can go on to the professionals to make millions of dollars. And the odds of that are so low, they're effectively zero. So there's this weird disconnect when you tell people to work for free. The reaction is no. But
yeah, some people make it like a rule, like I'll never work for free. I get paid for everything I do.
You've been working for free your whole life in school.
Particularly on the things that you love. You've been spending the most time, when you're growing up, you spend the most time outside of school on things you love. Nobody loves being like a paper boy. They love, playing Minecraft or playing tennis or, studying.
Or exploring or hanging out with their friends and you're brought into school where your spontaneity and your impulses are muted, and you're forced to work on stuff that, frankly, it's not that interesting to you the vast majority of the time. You're just going through the motions. And I think that's why it is so important to work for free, because you have to tap back into what matters to you. You've been conditioned for so long to do something else that other people want you to do. And if you allow that to carry through the rest of your life, you sort of lose touch with yourself. So that's why I'm a huge believer in free work. It comes first from that place that's as close to play as you can describe. You would do it even if you weren't being graded, told what to do, paid. You're doing it for the joy and the amusement of doing it.
Right. And it's interesting because a lot of people say, I don't even, this is the sort, a lot of great successful people say, even though I'm getting paid millions of dollars, let's say someone like Jay Leno, who was hosting the Tonight Show for 22 years, he said, even though I'm getting paid, these millions of dollars, I would come to work every day and just do this for free. Yeah. So a lot of people do say that, but why do you think the kind of professions we value most as a society, so whether it's a scientist or, the guys who created Google or a musician or artist or writer, these things that we value the most are also the exact things that have to start off by people doing for free. Like nobody is willing to pay these people until, even though they're doing things that are going to change society the most or impact society the most.
Yeah. What do you think?
Well, it could be that, let's look at it from a supply and demand equation. Like everybody wants to have, it's part of our genes say that we want to have a contribution and an impact on society. So let's say everybody at some point wants to make a contribution and have impact. And so you actually have to pay people to not have an impact. so that they do the jobs
that's the tax.
They do the jobs that nobody would want to do, to have minimal, nobody wants to just have negative or minimal impact. So you have to pay them to do that.
Right.
Like you have to pay them to, be a toll booth collector or work in a supermarket or, work a low-level management job at Procter & Gamble.
Right.
Nobody thinks, nobody when they're a kid thinks that's what I'm going to do for the rest of my life to have an impact on the world. So you don't need to pay me to be a low-level manager at Procter & Gamble.
Right.
And so to some extent, you're paid, particularly at these low-level jobs, you're paid to move away from your dreams. You're not really paid for the job. You're paid to move away from what you really want to do. That, if you want to be an astronaut, I've had 3 astronauts on this podcast. They would have done it for free for their entire lives.
Right.
Like, you couldn't, you would have to offer them millions of dollars at some other job for them to take them to pay them to move away from their dreams.
Yeah.
And that's probably true for most of the people I've interviewed.
Yeah. Warren Buffett said in here, take the job you would take if you were independently wealthy. You'll do well at it. And
yeah.
I agree. And I think the when you're starting off doing this work, your work is not so good, and
By definition, almost.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
let's take anything that requires a skill set to be developed. Like, let's just say a musician. There's the skill of being musical, and then there's the skill of performing, and there's the skill of
Yeah.
marketing. These are
Yeah,
all
yeah.
like hard skills. But when you start out, you've listened to music your entire childhood and your entire life. That's why you want to do it. But you have a sense of who the greatest are, who the middle is, and who the not so great are. And so when you start out, you're almost by definition going to recognize the gap between where you are and where your heroes are.
Right. Yeah. Was it Ira Glass who did that great piece on how far away you are from
I think that
becoming
is
great?
Ira Glass, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you're just inherently going to be bad for a while. But during that period, you get better and better. And now, I think before recently in history, no one could distribute their work effectively. They couldn't share their gifts with the world, relatively speaking. Only a few could. But now everyone can do it. So it's never been easier to do this stuff.
It's true. Like, you can do more than one thing. So people think, oh no, I have the 9 to job, and then I have the kids and this and that. I have all these responsibilities. But there's always time to, I've just seen it in a million cases. There's always time you can fit in to do your dream. So I was talking to one guy who on his commute to work on the train from Connecticut to New York, every day he would write 1 page of a mystery novel. And now he's got like 3 or 4 mystery novels written. So, and he's a successful novelist.
Yeah. You know Sean Platt, right?
Yeah. He lives in Austin too, right?
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. I mean, he's similar. I forget what job he was in before, but now he writes fiction, and he's one of the most prolific authors on the planet.
He writes like a novel a month.
He writes 10,000 words a day.
That's incredible.
It's insane.
How much do you think he makes a year?
Oh, man.
He makes a good living.
I would probably... if I had to guess, I honestly don't know, but if I had to guess, I would say over $250,000 a year.
Yeah, living
through
in
writing
Austin.
fiction. Yeah.
Young guy.
Yeah, he's young. He's one of the most joyful people I've ever met in my life. But yeah,
he wrote me. I wrote him a few weeks or months ago saying, "Oh, I was going to write fiction," and he wrote back and said, "Makes your life so much better writing fiction. Like, it's so much fun."
Why? Oh, just the fun of doing it. Yeah, I was having this conversation the other day with somebody, and I was sort of in the middle of something, so I didn't really dig in my heels. But I've heard this a number of times from people who they only read nonfiction, and they think fiction is effectively a waste of time. And I could just feel my blood boiling when he said that. I was,
yeah, because for me, I think nonfiction is usually written by, let's say someone writes a book about, I don't know, astronomy. They've spent 20 years being an expert on astronomy, and they think that the writing comes easy. But writing is just as hard a skill as being an astronomer, or a harder skill in many cases.
Yeah.
So I like reading fiction because those are the guys who spent, or women, who spent 20 years being great writers. So if I want to be a good writer, which I do, I have to read the great writers. And those are usually the fiction writers.
Yeah. So who are some of your favorite fiction writers?
Well, I'll read Raymond Carver almost every day, really. I'll read and reread stories. I've probably read his top stories hundreds of times. Another writer for me is a guy, Dennis Johnson, again, whose short stories are collected in a book called Jesus' Son, about this drug addict who kind of makes it through that. And I've probably read that book 200 or 300 times.
Wow. Really?
Yeah.
Is that the book you've read the most?
Probably. That's the book I've read the most.
No kidding. Why do you read it 200 to 300 times?
Because if you read that collection of stories, and it's not so much as novels, I hate to put down as novels, but it's really that collection of stories. I bought the collection, I think, first in 1994, and I've probably read it once a month or more since then.
Amazing.
And it's just, every sentence is so amazing and beautiful. I just love it.
Do you have a lot of it memorized at this point?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
And I've definitely, I could definitely, quote each story pretty accurately. And I've like written them out, on some of them, not on every one, but on some of them.
What's one of the quotes that really strikes a chord with you?
Let's stop to take a quick break. We'll be right back. I am hiring, and it is really hard to find somebody. I have no idea where to post this job. So thankfully, with ZipRecruiter, I can post my job to 100 plus job sites with just one click. Then their powerful technology efficiently matches the right people to my job. But this is why ZipRecruiter is different. Unlike other job sites, ZipRecruiter doesn't depend on candidates finding you, it finds them. In fact, over 80% of jobs posted on ZipRecruiter get qualified candidates in just 24 hours. No juggling emails or calls to your office. Simply screen, rate, and manage candidates all in one place with ZipRecruiter's easy-to-use dashboard. Find out today why ZipRecruiter has been used by businesses of all sizes to find the most qualified job candidates with immediate results. And right now, my listeners can post jobs on ZipRecruiter for free. That's right, free. Just go to ZipRecruiter.com/James. That's ZipRecruiter.com/James. One more time, to try it for free, go to ZipRecruiter.com/James. Today's episode is also brought to you by Thumbtack. Thumbtack makes it easy to find and hire skilled professionals for anything on your to-do list. From home improvement projects to event planning to personal wellness, Thumbtack connects you with professionals offering more than 1,100 different services nationwide. Simply tell Thumbtack a little bit about your project. Then, within 24 hours, you'll have up to 5 estimates from local pros that match all of your criteria. Check out their prices and reviews. Chat with them directly if you need more information. Pretty much anyone you need to hire is on Thumbtack, and I'm going to test that out. Carpet cleaners, personal trainers, photographers, even piano teachers. They'll help you find pros in over 1,000 different categories in all 50 states. I wish I knew about Thumbtack back when I was getting rid of all of my stuff. I threw out all of my belongings a little over a year ago. Those of you who read my blog know all about it. I got a friend to sort everything out and help me to figure out what's trash, what's good for donation. Now I'm going to use Thumbtack to help me find a professional transcriber and a professional translator because I get emails from people in all sorts of countries who wish my podcasts were available in other languages. Seriously, no matter the project, you'll find the help you need on Thumbtack. Thumbtack makes it easy to find pros for pretty much anything you need done. Download the app or try it now at thumbtack.com. That's thumbtack.com.
What's one of the quotes that really strikes a chord with you?
There was one story, it's called Jack Hotel, and they're both drug addicts. They go through this experience, but then they split apart, and the main character has people who care for him, the other guy doesn't, and they both take an overdose, and the story ends with Jack Hotel died, I am still alive. And just that one line sums up this great appreciation of how his life held on by a thread, but he has such appreciation and gratitude for it that he's able to kind of come back and survive.
Yeah. Do you love that because it's parallel to your own experiences?
Probably.
Yeah.
But I've also used that specific line many times in posts. Like I've definitely taken from the best.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I read hundreds of books, but I'll read a ton of fiction.
Have you had Raymond Carver on the? Or is he still alive?
No, he's not alive anymore.
Okay, yeah.
But he was a teacher of many great writers, so like Tobias Wolff, Jay McInerney, Mary Carr, who's been on the podcast. So he was a great teacher to a lot of really good writers, as was Dennis Johnson, as was Kurt Vonnegut. I mean, a lot of these guys learned from Kurt Vonnegut, like the simplicity and almost absurdity of his writing.
Right.
And so fiction, though, I could do an entire podcast just about fiction because that's really the main focus of my reading.
Yeah.
And I'll read nonfiction every day as well. I'll balance it off because you get ideas from nonfiction, but I'll get the skill from fiction.
Well, you can also get ideas from fiction.
Yeah.
I mean, it's creativity. Who was it? Arthur C. Clarke. He wrote 2001: A Space Odyssey, but he wrote fiction about that predicted satellite communication. And that was sort of the foundation for that getting invented, from my understanding.
Or you look at a lot of the great writers who did both. Isaac Asimov, of course, wrote the I, Robot series and the Foundation series, two of the best series in science fiction history. But he's written over 500 books, and most of his books were nonfiction.
Right.
So you kind of have to. He balanced it, but
he's the most prolific author of all time, right?
Yeah, although now in today's internet age, like, you have guys like Sean Platt or Steve Scott's been on the podcast. He's a prolific nonfiction self-help writer.
Yeah.
Now the world's different with book writing. Everybody can and maybe should, as you know from Book in the Box, should write a book. There's many reasons to write a book, and the tools for it are easier. The skill's just as hard, but you don't necessarily have to hit the high bar to get your book out there and market it and so on.
Exactly. You can write something over the course of, let's say, 2-3 weeks and get up to 15,000-20,000 words.
Yeah.
And you can have it published and on Amazon within 24 hours.
Right. And publishers, so originally the writing world was dominated by, let's call it like, now it's 5, but maybe it was like 6 to 8 major publishers, and they needed your book to be a certain length so they can charge for it.
Yeah.
So, it had to be like 250 or 300 pages.
And they would come up with creative ways to make it that long sometimes, right?
Yeah. And often I would see many books where I would think to myself, oh,
why
this should
is
be
this so
yeah,
long?
why is it so long? And what happened was the publisher would see a magazine article the author wrote and say, can you extend this to a 30-page or a 10-page article to 300 pages?
Yeah.
And the author would say yes, of course, because there would be these huge advances back then. And you could see the struggle of just making the topic bigger. But now I think the definition of a book has changed, because you can just upload it. You can make it a paperback still, and you could upload it to Amazon, make it a paperback, a Kindle, an audiobook. And it could be, our friend Kamal Ravikant, who's been on this podcast, Love Yourself was a bestseller. There's 2,300 reviews of it.
Yeah.
It's a massive bestseller.
It's literally saved many people's lives.
Yeah, and it's 8,000 words.
Right.
So that's that book, seeing that book and the success of it made me realize the definition of a book has completely changed.
Totally.
So, and that's also an example where, and this will be a good segue to your latest book, Play for a Living. But that's a book where he didn't have an advance for it.
No.
He did it for free. He self-published it, and I know it like pays his rent wherever he's living. It pays for all his travels. It I don't want to say it pays for his bills, because he does many things, but it could, if he wanted it to, pay for his bills. And I know many writers like that now, where they didn't take any advance. They did it for free. They played with the definition of a book. So they chose themselves, so to speak, and chose their definition of how things should be done, and massive success as a result.
Right. And you just put yourself out there. So how do you, before we transition to that, how do you decide on when you have to write a book? Because a lot of people, I would guess, might be thinking, well, maybe I should try and write a book. Do you think it's a good idea for them to try it, or do you think they have to feel that impulse?
That's a good question. I don't know. I think, so I've written a book a year since 2003.
Yeah.
And so I have about 18 books out, so maybe in some cases more than one book a year. And this year, 2017, I don't feel the urge to write a book. This might be the first year I don't write a book.
What's different?
Well, I've been really focused on this podcast.
Yeah.
And I do write every day. I still write articles every day. And I don't know what the difference is. I feel like I'm just not feeling the urge. But I feel like it's such an interesting experience to write a book and to say, it's like a badge of I've done it.
Yeah.
And I'm
really
trying
is.
to experiment with different things. Like I'm really trying to see where can I take creatively this podcast. I've been trying other things. Like last night I did stand-up comedy for the fourth time in my life.
Nice.
So I feel like I'm putting a lot of energy. Like that takes a lot of energy even to do it just a couple of times. And so I feel like I've been putting a lot of energy into other things, even though I'm still writing every day, just not in a direction that I can say, oh, this is a book.
Yeah.
So
have you shared any of your stand-up on this podcast?
No.
Are you going to?
Oh, maybe. No, I can't say I have. I'm not going to because I feel like I'm still, like last night was great. Like it was everything I wanted it to be. People laughed at every joke. I experimented with some things I was thinking about, not just in terms of mixing clean with very crude jokes, but also in terms of
much more extended, awkward pauses,
Right.
because I wanted to see how awkward it could get before the audience would start laughing. So I experimented with a couple of different things.
Yeah.
And I didn't know if it would work. It did mostly work, but now I also can see, oh, it worked and I could do it even more.
Right.
So I want to experiment even more before I release anything.
So
and also I'm using the same, in some cases, not in every case. I wrote some new jokes, but I also used some old
Right.
jokes. So, and I've only been doing it 4 times, so I'm still refining the jokes. So I don't necessarily want to put it up there and have people expecting the same, or
Sure.
expecting different jokes right away.
Sure. I like that. So you're liking the craft.
I'm loving it. Now, 2 weeks ago, I bombed. Nobody laughed at a single joke.
How did that feel? Had you ever died on stage before?
I'd never died on stage before.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah. So
This is
I've done a lot of public speaking.
Yeah.
And this was my
Well,
third
public
time.
speaking is like a safe zone for
Yeah.
the most part. No one's gonna boo you or do it's
but
totally different.
Even in public speaking, though, I do a lot of kind of, let's say, build up and joke telling, and,
Sure.
and laughter is often a release for the audience.
And they're
but
not expecting it. So
they're not expecting
yeah.
it. And that's the difference.
Yeah.
When you're going up at a comedy club where nobody knows who you are and there's no topic at all. Like when you're public speaking, the topic might be entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
The stand-up comedy, you're going up, nobody knows who you are. The MC doesn't even know who I am because I'm not I go up on these formats where it's all professional comedians and then me. So
Right.
the MC is almost resentful, like, who is this guy? And I just happen to know the club owners
Right.
in some cases because I've done podcasts there, and a lot of these clubs have podcast rooms and stuff. So I know the club owners, and they say, "Oh, come up with this lineup." So I'll have like this lineup of everyone's appeared on Letterman or Colbert
Right.
or whatever, and then there's this guy who looks weird, who's doing these weird jokes. And so it's incredibly uncomfortable and awkward. And not only that, it's not like in public speaking where if you give like, a joke every few minutes over the course of a half hour, that's like incredible.
Right.
This is, you kind of have to have people laughing. If you're only up for 5 minutes, you kind of have to have people laughing every 15 seconds. So that's like really difficult.
It is so hard, and it is such a pure art form in that sense. Have you seen the documentary Comedian?
Yeah, I've seen Comedian. I've seen everything and read everything.
Yeah.
And one thing I realized I was messing up on, and again, I've only done it 4 times, but I really analyze each time as well as compare myself to my heroes and so on. It's again that gap. What's the gap? The enormous gap between me
Right.
and my heroes, many of whom have been on this podcast.
Yeah.
And I realized there were some jokes I was kind of rushing through when I could have just sort of paused and looked at the audience and made it a little bit awkward.
Right, because you're in your own head. And
Yeah, and like I'm afraid of any silence.
Yep.
And so last night I decided, you know what? I'm just going to dive into the silence and let
Good.
people absorb the joke. Like sometimes
Yeah.
the joke might be a little tricky too. So I need to give them a moment to think about it. And
that's just as applicable when you're doing public speaking too. Those pauses, those extended pauses. You think in your head like, oh gosh, people are thinking that I'm bombing up here, but they're actually like, oh, this is a thoughtful pause. This person's doing this for dramatic effect. It's
and I do it in public speaking. Like
Yeah.
that was what was bothering me
okay.
about my bombing last week is that I felt like for some reason I wasn't connecting with the audience the way I do it with public speaking, and I
Right.
couldn't figure out why. So last night, and I don't mean to segue so much into
No,
comedy.
I love this stuff because I did my first stand up last year after. I had a joke notebook with 200 jokes in it
Oh, wow.
that I'd been keeping for 10 years, and I'm a huge stand up buff, so I love talking about this.
Well, I was really trying to figure out like where exactly I was rushing, like where I was trying to pander for laughs.
Did you film yourself? Or
I did. I do
Okay.
each time so I can watch
Yeah.
it later. And Jim Norton, the comedian, gave me that advice to film
Yeah.
each one. And
How was your body language?
I think it was good, although I think I can improve on that. Like,
Okay.
so one thing I did last night is that I acted out a little of my jokes a little bit more.
Yeah.
So but I think I could have done that more. I think you could do a little bit more movement and acting it out combined with this silence.
Yeah.
And so people are like, people would be like, what the hell is he doing? And I didn't do that enough even last night, although I would kind of stop doing it as soon as the laughs started kicking in, whereas I should have let it build up a little more before the punchline.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of subtleties because I used pretty much the same jokes as the week before. This time I had jokes on every laugh. Last week I didn't have, I had laughs on each joke.
Yeah.
Last time I didn't have any. And the difference was really the delivery, the a little more pauses, a little more recognizing when I was going too far with the crudeness. So I would back off a little bit, and a little more acting it out with each joke. So there was more body language in it, and a little more talking to the audience instead of just being scared of them. Right. So it was fascinating. So I think before I put anything online, I need to perfect more, which who knows, maybe it'll take years.
Yes.
So
good man. Good for you. But
it
really
segues
cool.
now into play for a living. Because for me, this is something I love doing and I love playing at. And I try to make as much play in my life as possible. Now, you wrote your other book, Play It Away, which we've talked about, but we could talk about it again. But I want to also talk about this play for a living. First off, I want to start off with a quote in the middle of it. And this book is so beautiful. I'm holding it in my hands. There's basically a quote on every page plus an illustration of the person giving the quote, and they're beautiful. They're almost like paintings. Are these paintings each picture?
A lot. So we had close to 50 artists around the world contribute all the pieces in the book, and we just said, do it in your own style, but try and match it up with the person who said the quote.
And you have this one quote from right in the middle of the book is Bill Murray, who's almost like would be my ideal podcast guest. But it's such a wise quote. He said, "I realized the more fun I had, the better I did." And it's really true. Like, and I was just reading an interview with Harold Ramis, who's his, acting partner, producing partner, director partner on so many movies, from Ghostbusters to Stripes to Caddyshack to Groundhog Day.
He was brilliant. Yeah.
And he was telling a story of Bill Murray. Just like somebody came up, they were walking along and someone came up to Bill Murray and said, "Hey, I'm a big fan." And Bill Murray just yelled at the guy and said, "I'm going to bite your nose." And Bill Murray jumped on the guy, like tackled him to the ground and bit his nose. And they're both laughing the whole time. So like Bill Murray, really just everything he did, he had fun and play with it. So nobody thought of him as violent. He just was playful with it.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important.
It is. And we love playful people because we just don't get that invitation to play all that often. A lot of our interactions as adults become serious, but it's so liberating to be around people like that. I mean, the Dalai Lama is like that as well. He'll go up to people. I heard on an interview the other night that he just walked up to somebody and just grabbed him by the nose and said, "You got a big nose," or just greeted them by tickling them.
And you kind of started this theme with your earlier book, Play It Away, which describe how that came about.
Yeah, so Play It Away came about after, I was in my mid-20s and I was in a high-profile dream job with my hero, Tim Ferriss. And I shifted at some point during that job from, this is so fun and exciting and we get to do cool work all the time and this is just, we get to work on these amazing projects, to becoming pretty serious for myself and focusing more on, okay, I got to get results, I got to be efficient, and I was just really pushing myself. I was working remotely a lot of the time, and what led up to this like period of burnout and anxiety was pushing myself to the brink, like depriving myself of sleep. Tim hosted this event called Opening the Kimono, where we had 130 authors and entrepreneurs from around the world coming in, paying $10K a seat. And I was in charge of this event. And my experience hosting something like this was, I hosted a kegger in college, basically. Like, I just didn't know what I was doing. And so as the event got closer, I realized I can't afford to sleep because
What were like? I'm always curious about events like this. It seems like too much work to
it's a
host
lot
any
of work.
event.
Yeah.
Like what were the bottlenecks that were just driving you crazy?
It was a lot of back and forth with the hotel, deciding on. And fortunately, I had help from an amazing woman named Susan Dupre, and she reached out to me and she was like, "Hey," she offered to work for free. And her experience was, I helped Steve Jobs launch the original iPhone. I've worked with James Cameron, Julia Child.
Why'd you want to work for free?
She was like, I will get access to great people, and I know that more will come of this that I'll benefit from than I'll gain from charging you guys up front. So I was like, great. I handed her a bunch of stuff and she just ran with it. So it was amazing, and she was just a wonderful person. She actually lives in New York.
Now let me ask you a question. Like hotels do events all the time.
Yeah.
Can't you just call up the hotel and say we're going to pay? You had 130 people paying 10,000 each, so 130,000. Or no, more than that. I can't do the math. What's the math? 1.3 million.
Yeah, it's something like that. Yeah.
So can't you just say we're going to pay you 100,000? Give us an event.
You can, and yeah. So certain hotels are much better than others, and we just wanted. I went into it with fresh eyes. So I was like, I'm going to make this the best thing ever. And so Susan and I would go back and forth on like, how can we truly blow these people away? So we were setting up wine tastings, and we wanted to have off-location restaurants, dining experiences that were really unique. We wanted to have sponsors giving them gifts every single day. So we even had, I think, in Amazon didn't do this at the time. They preloaded free Kindles loaded with Tim's favorite books. And so we had a special deal with them and all these other sponsors. And meanwhile, I'm coordinating logistics with the guests of like communicating very clearly, here's how to get from SFO to the event. And here's what you can expect. I'm coordinating with all the speakers and making sure like they have their presentations in order. Here's how the event is structured. There was just a lot of stuff going on. And it stretched my organizational skills to capacity. And so I hit a point where I was like, I can't sleep during this event. Otherwise, something could fall apart. That's how it felt at all times. Like it was just going to fall apart. And so I secretly ordered this smart drug called modafinil from a pharmaceutical company like in India or Canada.
I just read about this modafinil last night. Actually, it was on some thread where I saw Tucker mention modafinil.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's relatively speaking a safe smart drug. I don't recommend it or endorse it because I took it for several days in a row. I slept a total of 6 hours over the course of like 3 or 4 days.
When you took it, did you feel like an effect right away?
4 days. Not right away, but within an hour or so. Yeah.
And so like you would feel like within an hour, you would suddenly feel like kick in, like you were revved up?
Not revved up at all. It was mostly like just an ability to have very intense focus and limitless energy, but not uncomfortably energy. You know, when you have too much coffee, you hit your caffeine limit. You're like, oh, this is not fun.
And
but
I think
it
Dave
wasn't
Asprey
like that
takes
at all.
modafinil as well. A
Yeah,
lot of these
yeah.
guys. And then they also take...
A lot of people in Silicon Valley take it because if they're giving a speech to investors where they could raise millions of dollars,
Yeah.
they take that. Yeah.
And what about, and I don't want to segue too much from the story,
Sure.
but then there's Noopept, which is like modafinil times 1,000.
Oh, I don't know.
Okay.
I've never heard of it.
Because I've been researching it, but I haven't taken anything. I'm just curious.
Yeah. No, I mean, for its purpose, it was a smart decision, I think, overall, because the event went great. It was really wonderful. But I got back from that event and I basically like could feel the alarm bells going off in my body. You know, my vision felt like I was drunk. I couldn't, hearing stuff felt weird. It felt like it was coming slowly in waves. And after that point, I felt like my body was falling apart. And, I started having panic attacks, and which I'd never had before, and just like this debilitating anxiety kind of creeped in, and I was just, it was just exhaustion, and for being on top of the ball for the months leading up to it, I'd kind of shifted into this intense seriousness, right? That carried over going forward. There wasn't this period where I was like, we made it. It was like, hey, we're going into the next book, The 4-Hour Chef, and let's hit the ground running. So I just felt like I wasn't with it anymore. And all in the same weekend, what happened was the deadline for the 4-Hour Chef got pushed back, I think 6 months. A close friend attempted suicide and a family member died. So I took a week and a half off, and I came back and I said, Tim, like, I'm a mess right now. I think I really got to take some time off and quit. And I felt horrible. I was shaking going into that meeting because I was like terrified that I was burning a bridge, that I'd worked so hard, to have that relationship and everything. But I was at the point where I just had to take care of myself, and spent the next year basically trying everything that I could to get myself out of that state of anxiety, which again is, we all experience anxiety on some level, but not like this. This was different. This was debilitating. I found myself isolated because I didn't want anybody I interacted with to catch this weird energy that I had. It felt like I was contagious, and I felt like I was losing my mind. I felt like I was dying, and it destroyed so many things in my life.
Did you feel like, doing other things, like let's say entering, emotionally connecting with people, like entering into relationships or playing?
But it wasn't working. So I remember a friend of mine set me up on a date with her friend. She was just beautiful, super intelligent woman. And I went on the date, and I remember thinking, this is the worst possible time I could go on a date. Like, I know I totally weirded her out. And she actually said later on, like after, a couple of years later, she was like, that first date, that was really, like, I was very uncomfortable around you. I thought you were just kind of off. And my girlfriend, who I ended up dating for several months, I remember her saying to me, like, what is wrong with you? And I hadn't told anybody what I was going through at that time. I hadn't even really told Tim the severity of it. I just said, I need to take time off, basically. And I remember finally breaking down and just telling her, I feel dead inside all the time, and I have no idea how to fix it.
Did you think of, now, obviously when someone says that,
yeah,
if you were to say that to a psychiatrist, they would immediately prescribe antidepressants.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's a bad thing or a good thing. Like, maybe that would be a good thing.
I went to a doctor. I got an EKG and all that just to make sure I was okay. And they were like, yeah, you're healthy. You're just deprived of sleep, which was right. But the pills that they prescribed to me when I brought them home, I was basically skipping home, like, yes, finally a solution. And then I looked up the pills, and the more research I did on Wikipedia, forums, everything, I came across the side effects included anxiety, psychosis, insomnia, like the problems that I was trying to fix. So it made me very hesitant, and I came across so many anecdotal posts of people who were like, I've been on this pill, it stopped working after 2 weeks, I'm hooked on it, I can't stop taking it, and it's very frustrating because the side effects just amplify over time. So I decided not to take that because I realized whatever situation I was in, I knew I got myself into it and I could probably get myself out, but I just had to figure it out. And it took everything you can list for anxiety treatments, right? Deep breathing, therapy, journaling, every supplement under the sun, exercise, what else? I mean, psychedelic drugs. I was volunteering. I was praying. I was everything you could list. I even took a course on how to overcome anxiety. And it was so frustrating because none of it stuck. And
Just like every day you'd wake up
it was,
with worries. Would you wake up at 3 a.m. with all the worries?
I just felt like
what were
I was
you worried about then? Because you weren't even working.
Well, I just felt like I was constantly in fight or flight. I thought I was like, my survival was constantly on the line.
So it's almost as if you like hit some tripwire at some point when you were like perhaps working for Tim and doing the conference, and you couldn't pull back from it.
But it was an internal tripwire, right? Like no one knew that I was going through this. And if you ask my friends, when they read Play It Away, they were like, "I'm so sorry. I had no idea." Right? So on the surface, for the most part, you might think, Charlie's going through something, but you didn't think it was like constant dread. And I wasn't suicidal, but I was thinking like, if this is how my life is going to be, I don't know if I can make it, because this is brutal every day. So,
like, what did you think would happen? What was the dread of?
It was just paranoia, everything. When I would walk down the street, I would think people would fight me. I would think I was going to be arrested by a cop.
So could there be any chance, I'm just kind of running through the DSM-4 or whatever, was there any chance it's like kind of like a bipolar thing or a psychosis thing?
I don't think so. If that ever came into it wasn't bipolar. I think there was a period where I started getting delusional, and I think that was probably from a number of things, nutrient deficiencies and stuff like that, based on my best guess and research. But I don't think it was any of that. I think it was a number of factors, which were chronic sleep deprivation, chronic play deprivation,
deprivation.
Yeah,
I like that phrase.
Yeah, right.
Because I think many people suffer from that.
Yeah, I 100% agree. There's a quote in there from Stuart Brown, he's the author of Play, and that's the book that kind of was my 180 moment. It was the aha that led to recovering in a couple of weeks. Which he says the opposite of play isn't work, it's depression. And the research is pretty clear. They've done experiments where they've deprived animals of play. They give them love, they give them nurturing, all the things that they need to survive. Food, shelter. And when they deprive them of play, though, they inevitably grow up to be socially and emotionally crippled.
Well, you figure there's a strong evolutionary component of play.
There is.
So we
every human being plays.
Right. And you have to, what happens is hunting is a critical skill for survival. Like you have to be able to hunt for food, but you can't hunt all day long because, when your hunger is satisfied, you're not hunting. But play in between those moments of hunger, let's say you go hunting every few days, but how do you practice and how do you get in shape and stay in shape for hunting? You've got to get really good at play. So early ancestors of the human species and basically every animal has to learn how to play as a practice for what the real skill they need for survival.
Right. In which, by the way, when they're doing the act of hunting, it's not drudgery and boring work for them. It's still fun.
Right.
It's still a game. So play is, you're exactly right. It's essential to our survival. It's how we learn these skills. It's also how we learn empathy and compassion. Like it's how we bond with each other. It's how we learn to explore our environment. So if you talk about people who are anxious and depressed, what are their characteristics? They are often isolated, afraid to explore their environment, right? They're not moving around very much because they're afraid. So what happened was, for me, I'd been doing this research and experimentation for a year with minimal results, and I stumbled across Play by Stuart Brown, and I read that book in one sitting, and I immediately understood what the problem was. It was so clear as day that was what was missing from my life, And all the things, all the moments of joy that I'd experienced in my life, I'd had a very happy childhood. I'd had a very happy, for most of my adulthood, it was happy too, but it was always because I'd been a very playful person. I was always pulling pranks. I was always playing games with my friends and coming up with funny sketches or whatever. And I hadn't been doing that for years. And I'd approached life so seriously and joylessly, and very much in terms of like, what's the output? What's the outcome? Is this, what's the money payoff?
I wonder if like that's this transition from childhood to adulthood that happens to many people. Like, there's this statistic that I often quote that children laugh on average 300 times a day, but adults laugh on average 3 to 5 times a day. And it's scary, like, because there's a little bit of a reason for it, in that we have a lot more responsibilities, and responsibilities are scary, but you still have to, that's such a gap, and we're not really different. Our brains are not really that much different from when we were kids. Like, we still need to laugh.
Right.
So what did you start doing what for you was the play that cured the anxiety and the dread?
Yeah. So for the first exercise they recommend in the book is like, do the play history exercise. So what were the activities that you repeatedly and voluntarily turned to when you were a kid that no adult was making you do, no adult was judging or grading you? You were just doing it because of the internal joy and the paycheck that you gave to yourself. So what were those for you? I'm curious.
For me, probably like playing chess, riding my bike, and I just loved games of any sort, playing video games, and I loved any board games. So,
what were your favorite video games?
Well, back in that generation, it was by far Defender, or games like Asteroids, Space, Galaxy and Galaga. Yeah, so all the Atari games. So I loved all those, but chess I was obsessed with.
Yeah.
So that was definitely my play.
Yeah. Right on. Yeah. So for me, it was similar, where I grew up playing catch in home run derby all the time in my backyard. I also realized I had a heavy history of like pranks and practical jokes, that I was constantly doing sketches or making stuff up that would make other people laugh. Like, that was my biggest payoff, and creating art. And so I just said to myself, I'm just going to try and do these things on a daily basis, or as often as possible.
At first, did you have to force yourself to do it?
No. So it actually transitioned really nicely. So before that, I'd been doing coffee meetings with people and just sitting around drinking caffeine and talking about how important we were. And then I started asking them to do catch meetings in the park, or to go on hikes instead. And it immediately had an effect, not only on how I felt, but on how people responded to me and the quality of the meeting itself.
Well, I'll tell you an example for me in the past few weeks. So I always have, because of your book, Play It Away, actually, I took it to heart, and I started doing all my meetings, 100% of my meetings, over things like ping pong or backgammon or whatever. So a few weeks ago, I figured I'll meet with the CEO of one of my investments, and we hadn't hung out in a couple of years. I wanted to hear an update on how the company was doing, and he said, "Okay, come to my office anytime." And I said, "No, let's meet at ping pong, and let's play some ping pong." And so we met there, and rather than him being inundated with like all the distractions in an office and the business-like atmosphere in an office, we're just playing, and then in between every couple games, we're talking and, having a snack or whatever. And I learned that the company was going to get acquired. So I would never have learned this in an official business meeting. And we ended up talking about like really personal stuff about what he was doing next, what I should do next, and so on. And so it really works on a productivity level and practical level as well.
Yeah.
But I'll give you one negative side too.
Sure.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, go.
Sometimes I find if I'm unhappy with some aspect in my life, I get a little addicted to like playing chess, for instance. So I'll just play like all night, online chess. And then it's usually a signal to me that something is going wrong with my life.
Do you think that's from avoidance?
Either avoidance or escapism of some sort.
Okay, yeah, escapism.
So now I recognize that after like 30 years of doing this,
Right.
that it's a signal rather than necessarily a negative thing.
Sure.
But there is kind of like a little
Yeah,
danger
you can
too.
get hooked.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I know people who dropped out of college because of that.
Yeah.
Which may or may not have been a bad thing. But I have heard from numerous people, especially in sales, that when they transition to doing these meetings where they go on hikes or they go on little retreats, it transforms their sales process and makes it better. And they've said, instead of having clients, I have somebody who was in my wedding. We actually bonded on a real human level. And I think, that's why so many business meetings take place on the golf course, I guess,
Yeah.
right? Is having a 4-hour game. But
It's funny, regardless of politics, like
Yeah.
I don't know anything about politics or whatever, but I noticed like people are throwing the statistic out, like here's how much time each president spends on the golf course.
Mhm.
And Trump, of course, beats everyone. He's on the golf course more than anyone. And so I'm just wondering, I don't know the answer to this, but if he was on the golf course with various prime ministers, that's probably not such a bad thing. Like I kind of
agree.
prefer that to him than to him just like being on the golf course by himself.
I agree. Right. If he's with people that he's trying to bond with and spend time with,
It might
there's
be good.
there's no better way of doing it. But
You're not going to bomb someone you like played golf with.
Right. Yeah. But this is important, is to not. Have you ever played basketball or something with somebody who's taking it way too seriously and is not playful at all? Like,
Yeah.
you almost have to come down to somebody's level and keep it fun in order for it to stay a positive experience. So if you're just using it as a means to dominate somebody, the bonding benefits are gone.
Right. I think there is the negative, just like there's many positive aspects, and you have to do it. You got to be careful of, as weird as it sounds, there's like a slightly negative aspect to play if it's escapism or too competitive or whatever. And
Yeah.
I'm very competitive and very escapist,
Right.
and very non-confrontational. So I'll often escape into play to satisfy some other hole in my life. But it is also incredibly useful I used to be a day trader, and if I had a really stressful day trading, I knew just instinctively to go into play afterwards to
Yeah.
kind of like calm down.
Yeah, recess, right, is something that it's pretty cool. So I think it's Finland is the top in the world in education, and the thing that they do that's pretty different from the United States is they have up to 2 hours of recess a day. I think it is.
How many hours a day?
I think it's up to 2, and I could be wrong about this, but I know that a teacher in Texas went over to Finland to study it, an elementary school teacher, and she came back and she said, recess is the big thing they're doing that's totally different from us. Why don't we test this out? Because we have all these students with ADHD, behavioral issues, all this stuff. They started doing 3 recesses a day from none, right? Because all these schools have eliminated recess because they see it's this excess thing. All the behavioral issues stopped. Everything. Like the students went from being a mess to being totally fine. And so you need recess. And that's not 100% what I'm advocating. I'm just saying you have to do things from a playful standpoint. But if you're work all the time, you absolutely have to have recess. It's essential to your creativity, your happiness, your ability to do great work. Your productivity rides on you dedicating time to taking time off of that work and doing something that recharges you.
Yeah, so I think it's a good idea to kind of list the things. And I think this is a good idea in general to the question also of how do you find what you're passionate about?
Yeah.
What are the things you enjoyed doing as a kid?
You're not being forced.
Yeah, and how did it age?
Yeah.
So let's say you enjoyed basketball. You might not necessarily become a professional basketball player
Sure.
now, but you can use it to play, or you can use it to maybe write a blog about basketball
Hobbies.
or whatever
Yeah.
these things that you
Yeah.
would do normally, that you used to do for free as a 12-year-old. How can you let it back into your life now?
Right.
Now, I think both of these strands that we've been talking about, free and play, kind of came together in this book that you're going to release soon, you're about to release, play for a living. Again, this is one of the most beautiful books I've seen. Like, it's just
Thank
a
you.
beautiful looking book.
Yeah.
But you went, again, an alternative route to getting this published. You didn't kind of go for the traditional advance. You played and made a video and put together a Kickstarter. And like, how did you decide to do that? How did it go? What's going on?
How did I decide to do the Kickstarter or the book? Okay, so the Kickstarter, it just felt right. It's this community of creative people. I just wanted and I wanted to do it because it seems so much more fun. I've done traditional book launches where you try and drive a bunch of traffic to Amazon, but I like the excitement of being able to see the progress and make the community feel like, hey, we're a part of bringing this idea into the world.
And also, it's like you bake in an audience of buyers before you even make the book.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
You know that this is a book that people demand because you hit your Kickstarter goal.
Exactly.
So what was your initial Kickstarter goal?
10,000.
And what did you end up raising?
We in the first 35 hours we raised over $10,000. We're about 2 weeks into the campaign at the recording of this podcast, and I think we're at close to $15,000.
That's great.
Yeah. So I was really, really relieved that we hit the initial goal right off the bat.
And how did you decide? Sometimes I think a book of quotes is almost a trite way to put together a book. Now you because it's easy. You could just come up with 100 quotes.
Yeah.
But it's so beautifully laid out. You have these illustrations and artists of each person. Like, this is just. Here's Larry Page. This is amazing. Like, looks like an oil painting of Larry Page. And he says, if we were motivated by money, we would have sold the company a long time ago. The next one's Bryan Cranston. Ever since I stopped worrying about finances, I've made more money than I ever thought I'd make in my life. And I could say that particular quote is really true for me as well. I think a decade of my life was ruined. And I really do say ruined. Like, you're supposed to have no regrets in life. Like, you learn from everything. But I think I definitely spent my 30s scared about money. And when I stopped worrying about money and started doing things just for myself, it's amazing how things compounded and exponentially built up.
How did you stop worrying about money?
I realized I had almost no control over what was happening to my financial life. So rather than just worry about something all day that I had no control over.
What do you mean no control?
Like, I didn't have a normal job. I've always been very entrepreneurial, and so I kind of reduced my expenses, and I had some money saved away, and I just started writing for my own pleasure. And everybody who I knew from my prior career was like, what the heck is this guy doing? He's talking all about failure and depression and despair and how, and then how he came out of it. And suddenly I lost all of those, people who were reading me for a decade and, my whole investment business and everything. And then I started building up this new audience that eventually, started to pay off and in magnificent ways and pay off in many ways, not just money, but in personal satisfaction and so on.
And you didn't go into that expecting like this is going to be the payday. This is where...
No, in fact, I turned away pay. It's the free thing. I turned away pay for many, many years.
How often do you meet people who are financially set who are still constantly worried about money? Because I've met a number of them.
This is one story I tell, but I know of one guy who, I know the story third hand, but he was at a breakfast, and this guy's a world famous billionaire worth about $2 billion, has about 60,000 employees. And apparently in this breakfast, and it's a good friend of mine he was having breakfast with, so I trust the story. The entire breakfast, he was saying, I can't believe this fucking kid, Larry Page, has 18 billion and I only have 2 billion. And that was the entire breakfast, like he was complaining about it.
Are you serious, man?
Yeah. And so
I mean, you can be broke as a billionaire.
Well, recently, I mean, I don't know if you know this story, but like about a little over a year ago, I gave away all my possessions.
Yes,
and I just live
love
in
that.
Airbnbs.
Yeah,
and it realized like I can't. It's a discipline now for me. Like I won't buy anything new unless I replace something in my bag. So there's only so many things that fit in my one bag.
Yeah.
So if I buy a shirt, I'll throw out a shirt. But so I rarely buy anything.
Right.
I don't buy books. I'll get it on the Kindle.
Yeah.
But there's not many expensive things I could buy. Like I can't fit, I don't know, a pinball machine in my bag, for instance, and move it around from Airbnb to Airbnb. So I realized very quickly there's literally a cap on the amount of money I can spend, even if I wanted to. So there's just nothing I can buy.
Right.
And I'm not going to buy a home, and I'm not going to buy artwork, and I'm not going to buy a car, or it's all the big expensive people. Or I'm not going to buy another company. I'm not going to buy a jet. So these are all the expensive things billionaires
Very
buy.
liberating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I'm envious of that. I like it.
you could do it.
I could.
Let me see. What are some of your favorite quotes in here?
You know, the ones toward the end, I think, are the ones that really drive it home for me. I ultimately made this book for myself, right, as a reminder, and or at least that's where it began. But Plato, I love. What then is the right way of living? Life must be lived as play. I love Alan Watts's instead of calling it work, realize it is play. I forget how you pronounce him, the author of Flow.
Oh yeah, I can't say his last
name.
Right,
no. It's impossible. But he has a great quote in there about. He says, when we realize that the boundaries between work and play are artificial, we can begin the real work of making life much more livable.
I like this one. Like, you have a quote here from John Rockefeller. When you see any photo of John Rockefeller, who was the richest man of his time,
richest American ever.
Yeah, if you adjust it for inflation, right? So,
yeah,
because he basically owned what's now they broke up all the oil companies, but Exxon, Chevron, I don't know how many oil companies there were, but it was like 10 biggest oil companies that were combined into Standard Oil. But you always see these photos of him so stern and serious. You never think of him as someone who thinks about play. But here's a quote. I was early taught to work as well as play. My life has been one long, happy holiday, full of work and full of play. I dropped the worry on the way, and God was good to me every day.
Yeah.
You didn't think of him as a
I
poet.
know. I know.
And then here's, of course, our friend Tim Ferriss. I believe life exists to be enjoyed. What are some other quotes here?
There are a few at the end there.
Here's the Alan Watts one. Plato. Here's John Mackey, the founder of Whole Foods, who's a very playful guy. Actually, I've always enjoyed stories about him. Choose love instead of fear. If you do, a wonderful life of adventure awaits you. Here's Michael Jordan. Just play, have fun, enjoy the game. And I think there's something to that there's something to be said for that as well. Like, that was his work, basketball, but he always had to make sure he had to remind himself that it was play.
Mm-hmm.
And you have a similar quote in there from Joe DiMaggio that, once it's not play anymore, it's not a game.
Right.
And then it becomes work. And so I think kind of gamifying your work also is really important. And I don't think people do that enough.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just approaching it from a spirit of playfulness is a pretty easy thing to do. You just have to get back into the practice again.
And it's like, you could do it as an experiment. Like even like me doing this stand-up comedy last night, it's not like I'm going to make a career out of it. I just want to experiment doing it and see what happens.
Just try stuff.
Yeah.
There's a great book called Strategic Play. So if you work at a company and you want to like implement little exercises you could do before meetings or whatever, that's a great book. But I know the CEO of Lego, he has a side business where he just gets executives together and has them build things with Legos together to help them bond. And actually, that's become an effective form of therapy for autistic kids. It lowers their score on the autistic spectrum, and they're able to bond much more easily.
So when's the book coming out?
As soon as the campaign's over on May 11th, I'm sending it to the printers. I found out mid-campaign that Ingram Spark actually now does print-on-demand hardcovers. So once the initial run runs out, I'm going to be able to have it be on Amazon print-on-demand. Thank goodness.
And how much is it going to cost you per book? This is a colorful, expensive-looking book. It's kind of slick.
It is. Initially on Kickstarter, it's $35 per copy.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what the final tally is going to be because the cost of printing hardcover color books is astronomical. Like the The copy that you're
It's not
holding,
going to be more than 35, though.
no,
Maybe like 10, 8.
I don't know if it can be that low. But I mean, the cost of printing that copy alone on Blurb was $140.
I want to give one shout out because I
Yeah.
noticed something in here. The designer also designed the book, the
Choose
interior
Yourself.
design of not only Choose Yourself, but she did a really fantastic job. She did a fantastic job in everything.
Yeah.
She went above and beyond on Reinvent Yourself, my
Yes.
latest book. Erin Tyler Design, great
She's
choice.
the best. She's one of my close friends, and yeah, she's the best book designer in the world, I think.
Yeah, I always recommend her. She also did my friend Wendy Simmons' book on North Korea. What books would you recommend for further study on the benefits of play, and what games would you recommend?
Oh, okay. So I would recommend the ones that I mentioned. So strategic play for companies. Play It Away is good if you're going through a dark time or a funk of anxiety. With games, I always recommend to people to give improv a shot. It is very liberating to do improv.
Whenever I see people come out of an improv class, they're always like exhilarated.
Yeah.
And they've definitely bonded with all their friends in the class.
Yeah. And to a person, to a lot of people, they think, no, that's terrifying. But to anybody who's caught in this serious mode, nothing breaks you out of that faster and nothing liberates you more than realizing if I start saying yes to everything, life is so much easier and more fun. That was the thing, the force multiplier that rippled into all other areas of my life. And that was the thing that I attribute to having the biggest effect on eliminating anxiety so quickly, was being a part of that, tapping back into that for me. And other games, I mean, I'm a big fan of going to the park and throwing the aerobie around.
Yeah, because it gets you active.
Yeah.
Gets you jumping around.
It's unwieldy enough that you're having to chase after it and stuff. And I mean, I have a whole list of activities you can do and Play It Away, but it really boils down to get back in touch with yourself, your own play history.
All right. Well, Charlie Hoehn, author of both Play It Away and Play for a Living, thanks once again for coming on the show.
Thank you so
And
much.
I think
this is great.
advice, both from a practical point of view and a health point of view and everything. I'm gonna go and play the rest of the day.
Awesome. Thank you so much, James.
For more from James, check out the James Altucher Show on the Choose Yourself Network at jamesaltucher.com and get yourself on the free insiders list today.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this interview. Before you go, I wanted to just say thank you to everyone who has rated and reviewed this podcast on iTunes. I really love reading these and thought it would be fun to share yet another review. Bernardo Bernal said, "We listen to your podcast religiously. Condensed food for thoughts and the formulas to access the best in life. My family in Italy and Spain listen to you as well. Muchos gracias, grazie mille." And Stan Dubin said, "It's the questions he asks. Too many podcast hosts ask either vanilla questions of their guests or they ask the same ones over and over again. Very little digging, very little depth. James A. is different. Yes, he interrupts the guest a bit too many times, but I can live with it." Phew, good. I was worried he wouldn't be able to live with it. His ability to get in there and get several layers deep is worth 5 stars. So again, thank you for listening. Stan, thanks for that review. Bernardo, thanks for that review. Anna Scheinman, Andrew Rohn, the Unicorn Queen, Soul Surf Recovery, and every other person out there who is listening and sharing. I really, really can't thank you enough for your ongoing support and reviews. Thanks.
AI might be the most important new computer technology ever. It's storming every industry and literally billions of dollars are being invested. So buckle up. The problem is that AI needs a lot of speed and processing power, so how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? It's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. OCI is a single platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs. OCI has 4 to 8 times the bandwidth of other clouds, offers one consistent price instead of variable regional pricing, and of course, nobody does data better than Oracle. So now you can train your AI models at twice the speed and less than half the cost of other clouds. If you want to do more and spend less, like Uber, 8x8, and Databricks Mosaic, take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/advance. That's oracle.com/advance. Oracle.com/advance.